The following program is a sports handicapping show. That's right, we will be discussing sports betting and all kinds of other gambling stuff, including game predictions. As you know, not every bet will win, but we do our best. Feel free to use this information at your own risk, and remember, wager wisely, folks.
Broadcasting from the Vegas Video Network studios, live from the Las Vegas Strip, Covers.com presents Vegas SportsDay. And now from the sports betting capital of the world, here are your hosts, Teddy and the Professor.
It's Thursday in Sin City, and you are watching Vegas SportsDay, the pulse of the sports betting world. I'm your host, Teddy Covers, joined, as always, by my colleague, the Professor, Dave Malinsky.
Coming up today, we're going to tell you how the right chemistry could have one team blazing a trail through this unique NBA season. Hey, great news for Pac-10 basketball teams. After going 0-25 against ranked opponents so far this year, now you get to play the same teams everybody else has been beating up on. And when we turn to the football gridirons, we're going to talk about one team that's been nothing short of a wreck in their bowl games in recent seasons.
So, Dave, first thing on a Tuesday or Thursday, what day of the week is it? I hate when you have the Monday off and then you don't know what day it is all week. Today is Thursday. I'm certain of it. First take for a Thursday. What do you got for us?
You hate not knowing what day it is. So this is going to be a great show today, folks. You can trust everything we're going to be telling you. You know what's nice about bowl time? In the regular season, we try as hard as we can to watch as many games as possible, but you're watching a lot of games simultaneously. Bowl time, you get that particular focus as it plays into next year. Let's talk about this Texas defense. Now, on this show earlier in the week, we said that they might have been the number 3 team in the country this year defensively behind Alabama and LSU. Stats don't quite show it because their schedule was so difficult. So we got to watch Texas as a standalone last night. Gosh, were they good. And then you couldn't fully appreciate it by the box score. The box will tell you Cal had 195 yards and 5 turnovers. That's really good defense. But it was even better than that, because what you get when it's a standalone is you can grade play by play. Who won this play, the offense or the defense? This might have been in the top 10 games all season in terms of a defense winning the snaps against the offense, because a lot of the Cal yards that they did make were on broken plays. There was just simply nothing available for them most of the night. It's a very talented unit. They're going to have 7 starters coming back, a lot of freshmen and sophomores already in the rotation. Next year could be the year Texas gets back to football prominence. Okay, Teddy, now it is Thursday.
Yes.
So you'll know.
Pretty sure, yeah.
So have you brought a Thursday take, or do you have something from Tuesday that might fit? But whatever day you want it to be, it's all yours.
I love it. Malinsky giving me crap at the start of the show. Oh, it's going to be a fun one today. Don't get me all riled up, Dave. But I want to talk about what happened in the final minute of the Air Force Toledo game yesterday. We saw something that we're going to see probably more than once this bowl season. Air Force scores what should have been the tying touchdown, what in a regular season game would have been the tying touchdown, but instead of going for the extra point to tie the game, the Falcons went for 2 to try to win it all. That was a great thing if you had an Air Force ticket in your pocket. A lousy thing, obviously, if you had the Toledo side in that ball game, and the 2-point conversion failed. Air Force ended up losing by a point. But if you had Air Force plus the 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, wherever you got it, you were able to cash your ticket as long as you didn't have Air Force on the money line. And this is going to happen throughout the course of bowl season. It happens, the other time that this happens always is NFL preseason, where teams won't elect to play for overtime. They'll always go for 2 if they tie the game late, with the exception of tying it on a field goal. And so you don't see OT games in NFL preseason. We see some in the bowl ranks, but we also see on a regular basis, particularly the underdogs. If they get the game, opportunity to tie it, they will go for 2. And what does that mean? That means dead numbers that we don't normally pay attention to, plus 1.5, plus 2, plus 2.5. They hold a little bit more importance during bowl season. Well, a lot more importance during bowl season than they do at any point during the regular season. 3 devalued a little bit, 1s, 1.5, 2s, 2.5s, all increase in importance when you have this type of a scenario. Let's shift over to Market Watch, Dave, and we've seen every team in the NBA, with the exception of the Houston Rockets, but 28 of the 29 teams have now played at least 2 regular season games. And we've learned a lot in terms of pace so far this season, a very fast pace. The top 6 teams on the pace charts are all ahead of the number 1 team from last year. The top 3 points per 100 possessions team, all better than the number 1 team last year in that role. And the number 15 spot on that chart is a full 3 points better than it was last year at the end of the regular season. Teams are off to a torrid pace, Dave. What do we do with it?
It tells us that in this most unusual season, offense is ahead of defense. Because notice, we're focusing 2 ways on this. One is the pace. The other is the efficiency. So it's not that they're scoring more because they're playing faster. They're scoring more because they're playing faster and executing better on offense. Or do we say the defenses aren't executing as well? Tells us a little bit something that we had always wondered about the NBA, is that when you don't have much time to prepare, does the chemistry matter more on offense or defense? Part of the key is, on offense, things don't change much from the first time you're out there on the playground. There are certain particular rhythms: hit the open man, drive to the basket, knock down your shots. But defense really is that matter of chemistry. Knowing what your partner is going to do. If a guy's going to overplay, you have to be ready to come over from the weak side and help out. All these little things, like defending the pick and roll, which of course takes a lot of time for some of these NBA teams to learn. And with more personnel changes out there, we're seeing that the defenses are a step behind. So let's say over time, that element's going to change a little bit. The defenses will get a little bit better. You expect the efficiency levels to maybe slow down a little bit. But Teddy, this pace count, going up as quickly as it is, because that is not tied to efficiency. Are we likely to see the pace stay that way going forward?
No, I'm not convinced we're going to see that long term. What we will see, however, is ginormous line moves when it comes to total. What did we see? The Miami Heat total yesterday bet up 10 points from the opener. Maybe you're used to seeing that in college basketball early in the season where, with a $300 bet, you can move a total of 1.5 sometimes. Difficult to get down in volume on a lot of these college totals early in the season. That's not the case in the NBA. The NBA comes into the campaign, and the books, in theory, are ready for the totals. They'll accept maximum size wagers on totals, and they won't move the number to get it going away from you. And yet, with Miami yesterday, for example, that 10-point move, you bet it early, and you bet the over early, you cashed. You bet it over late, oops, you came up a little bit short on that wager. And that can and will happen. You're not going to see these dramatic line moves when it comes to the size. We saw one big one today, San Antonio taking a lot of money against Houston. But totals moves, even today, again, we've seen money come in on the Knicks-Lakers under. We've seen money come in on the Blazers-Nuggets over. And these total moves, they're likely to continue to be fairly significant over the course of the next couple of weeks. If you see the market starting to move on a total that you like, don't delay. These numbers are going to get blown out of the water in a relatively short span of time.
So what's been interesting late in the day, and this tells you something about the bettors and their confidence in the odds makers doing their job in recognizing these NBA patterns, we're not seeing the buyback. You will not see these big moves later in the season because the line becomes a little more stable. But when you see a game move the way that Miami-Charlotte did yesterday, you expect at some point later in the day someone to say, okay, let's start buying it back. The odds makers are too good to have been off by this far. We didn't really see that. How long is it going to take? We're going to figure probably until about the middle of next week. Once every team has at least 2 home games, at least 2 road games, there's a little bit of a statistical integrity that's in play. But so far, a lot of food for thought coming out of these numbers. Big part of what we're going to do in the weeks ahead is show you day by day where to go with it.
And speaking of food for thought, I want your food for thought. Tell us what you want to see on this show. We respond to your feedback. The email address, sportsday@covers.com. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter and get involved that way, @VegasSportsDay. And of course, active threads and discussions going on right now. Become a part of the community, covers.com/posting forum.
When we come back, we ask the big question, is Russell Westbrook ever going to make another shot? You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Are you looking for the latest odds, the fastest scores, the most important trends, and the best matchups and stats? Are you looking for the key late-breaking information that can make you a winner? Well, Covers.com has the answer. The world's largest sports betting community gives you a front row seat in the heart of the action, from the opening lines to the final scores. If you want to stay ahead of the game, Covers covers the numbers.
Hey, I'm Al, man. Is that how you get them to do that all the time? Just sit there and be an ass. Is that it? Hey, I'm Al. Hey, I'm Al Mancini at Top of the Food Chain. You are watching the Vegas Video Network. We got big forks, big spoons. I got a big mouth. I got no guests.
Okay, guys, it's money time. This edition of Money Time is brought to you by Covers.com. Remember, for all the key information you need in every sport, Covers covers the number. Let's start in the NBA. We're going to go to Oklahoma City, where the Thunder minus 5.5 tonight over the defending champs, the Dallas Mavericks. And, Dallas, not just bad, historically bad over their first two ball games at halftime against the Miami Heat. They're down 62-41. The rest of the game is garbage time. At halftime to Denver. All right, guys, we're going to step it up this time. We got blown out in our opener. No, it was even worse. Down 69-42 at the break. Again, nothing but garbage time in the second half for the Mavs. So here we have Rick Carlisle begging, pleading his team to play some defense tonight. It's going to happen, Dave?
There's a reason for Dallas getting off to a slow start. They stink. They really forget any notion about being the defending champions. If your starting lineup is Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, Sean Marion, Brendan Haywood, yeah, you got Dirk Nowitzki. Look at those other four. Marion and Kidd way past peak. Now, Marion had a great playoff run because he was a good matchup against LeBron James, not because he has much left in the tank. Vince Carter didn't start game one, started game two, goes without saying. You're not going to be a contender with Vince Carter in the starting lineup. Jason Kidd, that might have been close to his last hurrah at his age in that playoff run. Not only is Brendan Haywood not a starting NBA center, they don't have a backup behind him. So if you have a number two at number one, and you don't have another number two anywhere, you've got a lot of weaknesses. So this Dallas team is not just underachieved so far, they've been bad. Again, much worse than the scoreboard show. They won the first two fourth quarters 54-26. Throw that out, and this is one of the worst 0-2s to open a season in quite some time. Arguably even worse than Utah's clunker of an 0-2. Do the Mavericks get better? We're not sure. Right now, we're not sure this chemistry necessarily works. We're not sure the heart is there. So let's go to a quote from Tyson Chandler that we thought was real interesting where the mindset of this team may be. This is Chandler, a current Knick, speaking to the New York Post. Said, honestly, I kind of saw it coming because when you put a team in a situation where you say, you're the defending champions, but we're not necessarily trying to repeat. And when I say that, I'm not saying that they don't have the pieces there. I obviously think very highly of those guys. But I say that because they offered everybody 1-year deals. So they knew nobody was going to necessarily accept that. And when you have the veteran guys in the locker room, the type of guys they got this time of their career, it's tough to face that. This is not a defending champion.
Yeah, Oklahoma City brings some questions to the table, however. Of course, 4 games in 5 nights to open up the season. Yes, they've gone 3-0 so far, and 2 of the wins are coming against playoff teams from last year. But the issues at point guard, again, Russell Westbrook, we talked about him a little bit yesterday. Westbrook, 0 of 13 from the floor in the win over the Grizzlies last night. No, he was playing against a backup point guard because Mike Conley got hurt in the first minute of that ball game and didn't see the floor again. So Westbrook against a backup still couldn't make a shot. He had as many turnovers as points in that ball game. And, this is the same Westbrook who's offensive issues, inability to distribute the basketball, propensity for taking bad shots, kind of forced Oklahoma City into blowing fourth quarter leads in each of their last 2 losses to Dallas in the playoffs last year. So far this season, we're talking about a guy who's 16 of 51 from the floor with 18 turnovers. But there's one good matchup for Russell Westbrook. Might be coming against Jason Kidd this evening. Kidd, not the point guard on either end of the floor that he once was.
Let's go to Portland with what could be a preview of the NBA Western Finals. Portland, a 5-point favorite over Denver. Trailblazers off to an awfully good start so far, and it's easy to see why. There's a chemistry issue. that's in play in a very positive way. If you look at the careers of Gerald Wallace, LaMarcus Aldridge, Marcus Camby, these are all three very good players that have had to play a lot of their time out of position. Well, look at how well they fit together. All three of those guys able to accent what they do best naturally now. A guy like Raymond Felton out there pushing the pace and distributing a little bit. So let's take a look at a couple of things that you want to talk about with Portland. One is that chemistry, but two, let's look at the pace. Now, again, we're talking about small samples, as was the case in Market Watch. Just a couple of days worth of play, but a small sample with a logical pattern behind it can get you ahead of the markets if you're willing to take that plunge. Portland last year, dead last in the NBA in terms of pace. Portland through 2 games this year, all the way up to number 5. This is a team that can run the floor. Felton can push that pace because he's been there from day one. They got a lot of finishers in the open court. Get ready for not only better Portland basketball, but a little different style of Portland basketball.
And there were a lot of concerns about Denver coming into the season. Heck, half their team signed long-term deals in China that they won't be able to get out of until March. We talk about guys like Wilson Chandler and J.R. Smith and Kenyon Martin, guys who were integral parts of this team in the last few seasons, at least the latter two. And Wilson certainly last year, even though Denver came up short in the postseason, didn't go on quite the run they did like they did in 2009 when they went all the way to the Western Conference Finals in that 6-game battle with the LA Lakers. But even with the loss of those guys, this team is deep. You know, they went 11 deep the first game last night. 13 different players saw time on the floor for Denver, and they got production out of all of them. That's what the Nuggets can bring to the table. So Denver, I'm not going to say uniquely poised, but certainly a team that is in good position when we look at the rigors of the upcoming NBA campaign, where teams are going to be on back-to-backs and back-to-back-to-backs and 5 games in 6 nights and 6 games in 8 nights. Denver has the capacity to withstand those type of awkward scheduling spots. No one yet on the team even averaging 30 minutes a game through their first 3 contests, although they've both been blowout wins. We haven't seen the Nuggets have to play in a half-court offensive set very much, and we haven't seen them in a tight game in the fourth quarter looking for who their go-to player is going to be. Perhaps we find that out tonight from Denver, because Portland, even though their pace is fast, man, they played incredible defense the other night against Sacramento and have that capacity potentially here against a unrested Nugget squad to do the same thing tonight.
Well, we've got a fascinating game to watch tonight. Denver will push. Number 1 in the NBA in pace already. Probably going to stay that way. George Karl very happy with this rotation. And when you see Karl on the sidelines tonight, see how relaxed he is at the start of the game. Shows you what's like when J.R. Smith is a half a world away. I think that's one guy that they do not want back. They don't need him with this particular team. But Teddy's right. What's going to be interesting about Denver is, okay, you haven't worn the other team down. 2 minutes left. It's a tie game. It's your ball. Where are you going with it? Who's going to take that shot? Who's going to be that go-to offensive threat for them? So I think Portland is a team that might be pretty good as a big underdog because you're not going to knock them out of games. They might be pretty good as a big favorite because they're going to wear the opposition out. But in these short price range games, let's say -5 to +5, this may be the Denver danger zone this year.
Malinsky said I was right. All right, let's go to Palo Alto. UCLA and Stanford this evening. The Cardinal -6 at home against the Bruins. And UCLA certainly showing signs of having turned their season around. They've won 5 straight games. And frankly, they move the ball better. Much better offensive flow without Reeves Nelson, who's now been suspended for the umpteenth time and suspended indefinitely at this stage. 5 players have scored in double digits in each of their last 2 ball games. Yet the betting markets, Stanford slumped ATS. They got up to that great start in November. They covered every point spread for the entire month. In December, they haven't covered any. And yet the betting markets, with this number of 6, is staying Stanford still better than UCLA, more than just a home court edge. Is that the case, Dave?
Well, we give Teddy credit for getting one right, but you know the old saying about broken clocks? What's the over-under about him getting another one right before the game's out? This UCLA team is similar to what we talked about with George Karl, being so much more relaxed without J.R. Smith. Now, Ben Howland, without Reeves Nelson, they practice better, they play better, there's a nice chemistry, they move the ball, the kids are working well with each other. But the problem is there much upside with this group. Because again, it's grinding out against some pretty weak competition. So we don't know if they've got the big-time players for an upside. NBA scouts are not going to be flocking to UCLA games the rest of the year. The other issue they're still facing, too, they beat Richmond by having to use a lot of zone defense in the second half of that game after falling behind early. They're having to play a lot of zone now because that chemistry hasn't developed to play man-to-man the way that Howland would like to coach. So there are still some issues going forward. So they're going to maximize the talent that they do have. The question is, how good can that talent be? Similar question, though, about Stanford. And it's so much fun to go from Denver to Stanford because Stanford could be the Denver Nuggets of the Pac-12. They've got a lot of depth. They're going to defend awfully well. Really good wingspans on the court, holding their opponents under 40% shooting, and just a dynamite ratio, 207 turnovers forced versus 111 assists. But okay, starting tonight, close Pac-12 game, 2 minutes left, Stanford ball. Who are you giving it to? To be that scorer at crunch time. That may be the big weakness for the Cardinal this year.
Yeah, no question. I mean, Stanford is a team that has no one in the top 15 in the Pac-10 in scoring, rebounds, or assists. The depth is there. Dave talked about those great assist to turnover defensive numbers. They're holding foes under 40% from the floor this year. UCLA's not looking to push the pace. UCLA never looks to push the pace under Ben Howland. And even with those zone defensive schemes, because the man-to-man hasn't been good enough, well, 127 is the total on this game. We've seen some upward pressure on the over in the last hour or so. I'm not so sure I buy that current line move. Might look to take this one under the total. The only concern, and the big concern here, is do we see scramble points late in the game? Because if it's one of those contests where someone's down 6 or 8 and there's 2 minutes left, you can get 20, 25, who knows how many points in the last couple of minutes, and that's an under-better's worst nightmare.
So we'll alleviate that nightmare by not getting involved too heavily, but here's where we can go on this NBA board. Oklahoma City opened 7 yesterday. The odds makers were right. It's down to 5.5 now. The market's wrong. They're saying these are the Mavericks. They'll get it together. They'll bounce back. Now, we don't think it's there. Take a look at the plus-minus for the first 2 games. And we'll use, for the vagaries of this stat, we'll use it a lot over the course of the year when it's meaningful. First 2 games, they're minus 49 with Dirk Nowitzki on the court. They're minus 53 when Jason Kidd's been on the court. Those are their 2 best players. So let's play Russell Westbrook to get that bounce back tonight against a team that have trouble staying in front of him. Let's make play of the day for Thursday, the Oklahoma City Thunder, minus that 5.5. Let's fade the early market moves this morning, lay the 5.5 with the Thunder as our basketball play of the day.
When we come back, money time turns to bowling for dollars. We're going to take a look at Saturday's matchups.
I'm Courtney Leone. This is Vegas Video Network. You want me to mention awkward silence? Let's do that then, okay. Never been on set here before. I'm always out live on location for Awkward Silence 2.1. I'm Courtney Leone, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network. Good? Better?
Livestream is your premier place to watch live events on the web, mobile devices, and connected TVs. See new events daily or broadcast your own at livestream.com. Livestream. Be there.
Let's go to Saturday in Houston, where Texas A&M, a 10-point favorite, total 68 against the Northwestern Wildcats. And Northwestern, they've got this awful bowl history. They never seem to win these type of games. They've done a real good job at covering numbers in this role. Pat Fitzgerald over the last 4 years, 12-3 against the spread as a road or bowl underdog. In bowls, 0-3 straight up. 3-0 against the spread, 2 of those losses coming in overtime. The Wildcats have been able to step up in class. They just haven't been able to win in this point spread range. They don't need to win, Dave, do they?
No, they don't, but they just might. You probably know where we're going to go with this one a little bit because Texas A&M was a big postmortem feature about a month ago. The idea being there's so much pressure on the Aggies for having had a disappointing season. They only went 6-6. It's like, what went wrong? Well, you know what? Not a lot went wrong with Texas A&M. What went wrong was the original perception. The story should be, how did the media and the coaches get A&M so wrong back in August when they were number 6 and number 7 in the 2 major preseason polls? They were never that. It was a false perception of A&M. You know what happened on the field this year? They got a little better. Despite only going 6-6, They were 20.5 net yards per game better than they were last year. There were gradual improvements. What happened, though, is as they got better, they lost a lot of close games to good teams. That's their true level. Are they supposed to be a 10-point favorite here? We don't think so. They're just not that much of a dominating team. They've got a good pass rush on defense, number 1 in the nation in sacks. Not quite as good as that because there were so many pass attempts thrown at them. But because of those attempts, when they didn't get to the quarterback, 113th in passing yards allowed. Now look at the possible levels of disorganization here. You know, Mike Sherman was fired. Tim DeRuyter, the current interim head coach, is also the head coach at Fresno State. So how hard is it to prepare your team for a bowl game when you have to be out recruiting and getting assistant coaches hired for another program? I don't think there's anything special about the A&M motivation for this one. Yeah, on personnel, they're good enough to maybe beat Northwestern. But are they good enough to get this kind of margin?
Well, I mean, the whole thing with Northwestern, the team speed isn't there. You know, they're slow. They're your plodding Big Ten squad. But you have to like the quarterback, Dan Persa, a guy who finished number 1 in the nation in pass efficiency last year. This year, he spent the first month of the campaign hurt. Took him a little while to find his rhythm. And guess what? At the end of the season, number 9 in the nation in pass efficiency. So Persa is one guy. I'm not worried about the blitzes against Dan Persa. He gets rid of the football quickly. And again, Northwestern's not going to make big plays up and down the field. They're going to be tough. This is a gritty team. They take on the personality of their head coach, Pat Fitzgerald, a former linebacker and a tough kid and tough guy all around. I wouldn't be shocked either, Dave, to see Northwestern hang around in this game for a long, long time.
Let's go to the Sun Bowl in El Paso, where we've got Georgia Tech, a 2.5-point favorite over Utah. Total 50.5. Yes, that's right. Georgia Tech is the favorite, despite a rather dubious bowl history under Paul Johnson. They've gone 0-3 straight up in ADS so far, losing to the spread by 59.5 points. It's an average of 20 points per game. This wonderful Paul Johnson offense that fools teams in the regular season when you've only got a week to prepare for it. Well, you know what? When you get a full month to prepare, it becomes just Georgia Tech's athleticism. They're still Georgia Tech. Not a lot of dynamic players in the skill positions there. Look at how bad this offense has been in the postseason. 8 points per game and 267 yards per game in those 3 bowl losses. Once again, Teddy, could it be another case where once a guy gets enough time to look at Johnson's playbook, he can figure it out?
Probably. And again, we're talking about, it wasn't like Georgia Tech was facing Alabama's defense or LSU's defense in these bowl games. Last year, they faced Air Force's defense. Yeah, you know that same Air Force defense gave up 42 to Toledo yesterday? They held Georgia Tech to a single TD in that game. And no question that Air Force has familiarity against the Yellow Jackets' triple option. Guess what? So does Utah. Utah faced up against Air Force every year in the Mountain West Conference prior to this season. Kyle Whittingham's been coaching against this style of offense for a long time. The Utah players have experience against it. But, you look at this Utah offense, and there are big issues, big issues. We talked a little bit about the Georgia Tech offense with Tevin Washington. We did a postmortem on him early on. One of the first shows we did was a postmortem about how Tevin Washington's passing stats were misleading. And you look over the last 8 games of the season, Washington, 4 yards per rush, 5 completions per game, completing passes less than 40% of the time. And how many interceptions? He had a bunch. 7 INTs and only 104 pass attempts. So Washington has had issues. Now he's going up against a defense that has issues. Utah's offense has issues. We talk about some of the John Hayes, the quarterback who was forced to fill in for the Utes throughout the second half of the campaign, an unheralded junior college transfer who got the job because Norm Chow knew the coach of his junior college team, and then he forced into the role. Not a lot of dynamic playmakers for Utah either. So what does that set us up for, Dave?
Sets us up to maybe take a little bit of a 3 if it shows, and something else we'll talk about later on the show. But why do we take the 3? Kyle Whittingham's actually done an awfully good job of preparing for bowl games. They've gone 5-1 straight up, 4-2 against the spread under his direction, but 8-1 straight up in the last 9 bowl games when it was either the head coach or an assistant coach. The fact that they're used to playing Air Force every year, didn't play them this year because of the conference switch, but they're used to playing Air Force every year, a little bit of familiarity with what Georgia Tech does. So defensively, Utah can be in the hunt, but we need a full +3 before we're going to trust the Utah offense with any of our money.
Let's go to San Francisco in Yeah, we keep on. We say this every day. This is the worst bowl game. This is the worst bowl game. This is the worst bowl game. Certainly between two major squads. We have Illinois. Yeah, Illinois, the same Illini team that's 0-6 straight up in their last 6 ball games. We may never see that again from any bowl team ever in the future. But they're 0-6 their last 6 games. And they're still better on a neutral field than UCLA. Illini, -3, total of 47 against the Bruins. This is a hold your nose and pick it bowl game, Dave, isn't it?
Or hold your nose and just avoid it bowl game also. We talked to our good friend Arnie Lang about this Illinois setback. Will we ever see a team, again, have 6 consecutive losses and get into a bowl game with that? Yeah, it's possible. If it's a team that has a road game at Hawaii in the regular season, you know, you can actually go 7-6 because when you play at Hawaii, you're allowed to play 13 games. But no one will break this record. No one is ever going to have a 7-game losing streak coming into a bowl. So how does Illinois rejuvenate themselves? We're not sure that they do. They've only got 2 healthy running backs on the entire roster right now. Jason Ford, the starter, he's out. Vic Koenning, the interim coach, is he going to be excited to win this? Probably not, because he got snubbed for the head coaching job. They hired Tim Beckman to come in from Toledo, even though Koenning arguably has as good a resume or better. The only motivating force we could see might be the Illinois defense. They were a top 10 defense this year. Could that group get motivated behind the coach? You know what? Our assistant coach, the guy who directed us, he should have had this job. We want to send him out a winner. We're going to go win this game for him. Does that work? I don't know. When you've lost 6 games in a row and you've sort of lost your way, it is a little bit difficult to get the focus back out there. But the reason why we focus on the Illinois side is if they bring it, they can win it, because boy, does UCLA have problems.
Yeah, problems galore for the Bruins. They shouldn't have applied to the NCAA for the waiver to get this bowl bid in the first place. But they did, and the NCAA, in their infinite wisdom, decided that UCLA deserved to be in a bowl instead of, I don't know, Ball State or Western Kentucky. And, you know, things have gone from bad to worse for UCLA since the end of their dismal regular season. You know, we remember when they got waxed by 50 against USC. You know, this type of thing's going to happen with bad teams. It's gotten worse. Backup quarterback, Richard Brayhout, he's suspended. That's always an issue because they've had QB issues, I don't know, for the last 5 years straight, maybe longer. They haven't been able to get a single quarterback healthy through a game. So Brayhout's not going to be here. Linebacker Isaiah Bowens. Offensive lineman Albert Sid. Defensive back Tony Dye. They all flunked out. Couldn't make grades. They're not going to be available for this ball game. Starting linebacker, middle linebacker, Patrick Larimore. He's out with an injured right thumb, along with Bowens. And senior linebacker, Sean Westgate, he's not likely to play either with concussion issues. We have an interim head coach, a weird coaching situation. Mike Johnson doesn't have a lot to work with the Bruins. It's too bad I don't like the Illini side because I really want to bet against UCLA.
When we get back, time to get those party hats on. We're going to go to the New Year's Eve Bowls. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Traditional media believes that after about 3 minutes, you'll tune out. Most Vegas media companies think if it doesn't jiggle, you won't tune in. At the Vegas Video Network, we think both are wrong. The Vegas Video Network is the first and only live online broadcast network that specializes in insider news and expert views about Vegas. We combine great storytelling with the ability to watch when and where you want on your computer, mobile device, or television. Discover the real Las Vegas. Visit VegasVideoNetwork.com.
Let's go to the Liberty Bowl in Memphis for New Year's Eve, where Vanderbilt and Cincinnati will battle in Nashville. Vanderbilt -1.5, total of 48 in that ballgame. And Dave, when you and I first broke down the bowls, the very first day after the seedings were announced and the first point spreads were coming out, I think we both said this was our biggest disappointment. Bet on versus bet on, 2 teams that we wanted to be involved with, but they're playing each other. Now, I personally think one of the two is a little bit more of a bet on than the other one, but we'll have to see. For Cincinnati, we're going to find out who the quarterback is going to be later today. Zach Collaros has been healthy enough to practice. He missed the end of the regular season. The Bearcats' offense wasn't as good with Munchie Legault behind center, but between the two of them, this Cincinnati, I guess the dynamics of the Cincinnati quarterback position, they were able to run the football very effectively. 427 rushing yards out of the QB position, 10 touchdowns. That may be bad news for our Vanderbilt defense that didn't see a lot of dual threat QBs in SEC play this year.
The one thing Vandy has going for them in practice, they've got a dual threat QB of their own that'll help to emulate it in Jordan Rogers. Had a terrific run for them this year. They only went 3-4 in the games where he was actually the starting quarterback. Technically not the starter in the Georgia game, but he played the bulk of that game. That's when it was turned over to him. Only 3-4, but take a look. The 4 losses to Georgia by 5, Arkansas by 3, Florida by 5, Tennessee in overtime. They're a play away from winning any of those. The 3 wins, Army by 23, Kentucky by 30, bowl-bound Wake Forest by 34. They were playing awfully good football. Rogers is a fun guy to watch because he's a good competitor on the field. Not a great passer, only 51.5% completions. As many interceptions as touchdown passes. Not a great runner either, but he put some stats up there. He just goes out and competes, and the team bought into it. Almost similar to what the Broncos did with Tim Tebow in the NFL, Vanderbilt has been a believer because of the way Jordan Rogers has competed. The problem is, where do we go with it? We would have loved it against someone else. Because the difficulty that we had talked about that very first day about having to accept this matchup has only gotten worse. Practice reports from both teams, very good. They're happy to be here. They're bringing it. Fan support for both teams, already over 10,000 tickets sold from both schools. Very few bowls out there are going to have over 10,000 from each team. This Utah-Georgia Tech we just talked about earlier, the combined sales for the 2 schools is under 4,000 for both combined. So there's a lot of passion. The fans are going to be there. There's going to be a big crowd there. It's actually going to be one of the more competitive games of all. We just don't get to do anything with it.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Sorry, I cut you off, but I also made a mistake. I said it was in Nashville. This game's in Memphis, not in Nashville. It's a long way from Nashville if you've never been to Tennessee, but still, as Dave mentioned, the Vandy fans will be making the trip, and so will the Cincinnati fans. So we're going to see good passion for this ball game, good energy, and this is the type of game, when we talk about the Big East, maybe we see how Rutgers fares against Iowa State, see how that looks over the course of the next 24 hours. And you can get some sense of the relative strength of these 2 conferences. My gut reaction, obviously, says the SEC is better than the Big East, and even the best team in the Big East, or one of the best teams in the Big East, as Cincinnati was, not necessarily as good as a middling team from the mighty SEC.
Let's go to the Georgia Dome. Your last chance to win a college football bet in calendar 2011, Saturday night, New Year's Eve. Right now, we've got Auburn, -3. Total sitting at 49 over Virginia. A surprising -3. Auburn had actually opened a little bit shorter. There's been money to the Tigers, despite the fact that it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks. Both their offensive and defensive coordinators, Gus Malzahn and Ted Roof, have left, not necessarily for greener pastures. They're both taking pay cuts to go with lesser programs. Roof just swapping out to become a defensive coordinator again at Central Florida. Malzahn taking the head coaching job to go back to his home state of Arkansas, coaching in the Sun Belt at Arkansas State. But a pay cut to take a job that's below jobs that he's turned down in the past. So it led to something that has us a little bit curious. When you see them leaving the way they did, does it tell us that the Cam Newton investigation may still be ongoing for Auburn, that there's a reason to get out while the getting's good? And then Michael Dyer, who is really the heart and soul of the Auburn offense. Great runner between the tackles this year, 242 carries, 1,242 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's not going to play. So with the coaches leaving, with the best offensive player out, why is money flocking to Auburn? Maybe it's that old conference thing again. People, when given a choice, will bet the SEC over the ACC, but we're not sure they're right this time.
Yeah, Virginia tried to step up in class in their season finale against Virginia Tech. They had a chance to play for the ACC title, and they got annihilated by the Hokies. There was a legitimate class difference in that ballgame, but more than anything else, maybe a maturity difference between those 2 teams. Virginia Tech was used to playing in big games on big stages. Didn't show in the ACC championship game against Clemson, but Virginia Tech had been in these type of spots. And this very young Virginia team, maybe they read the press clippings a little bit too much. Maybe they couldn't sleep the night before the game. But the bottom line was they did not react well to a high-pressure environment. They may well have learned from that experience. Again, this is a Virginia team. They went on the road and won at Miami and at Florida State over the back half of the campaign as part of the 4-game winning streak prior to that Virginia Tech loss. So they've been able to win in hostile environments. They've been able to win in neutral sites, and this team definitely got better down the stretch. Mike London, ACC Coach of the Year, I thought he deserved it. There were rumors, certainly early on in the annual college head coach search, that London would be heading elsewhere. Didn't happen. He's staying put with the Cavaliers. In my mind, that's a very, very positive sign for a program that's clearly on the rise. And the one thing with London you want to know, the offensive schemes. London's known as a defensive guy, and their defense was very good this year, but the offensive schemes that he likes to run, fairly complex, fairly confusing, and that may give an Auburn defense that did not step up in class well some fits as this game goes along.
You know what the real shame is?
What's that?
Cincinnati is a dog against Auburn. Vandy is a favorite against Virginia. You're betting both of those, aren't you?
No, I don't know.
Say, if we could rearrange New Year's and just sequence those matchups differently.
Well, if we could rearrange New Year's, let's just make it a week from Thursday.
No, I got plans already. we can't
rearrange New Year's.
No, we got a friend from out of town coming in. We got dinner next Thursday night already scheduled, so we can't do that. Yeah, Teddy talked about those Virginia offensive schemes. Here's where it becomes perhaps a bit of an issue, not only in preparing, but as the game goes on. Gene Chizik is a former defensive coordinator. So if I think, okay, no big deal. He'll take over for Ted Roof, things will be fine. But it's been 5 years since Chizik was a defensive coordinator. In the past, when he's been the coordinator, he's done it from the press box. Now, he's got to do it from the field, recognizing those different Virginia formations. And not many teams in the country will do as much shifting and getting into different formations as Virginia will. Could Chizik possibly be a step behind? Okay, so we would like to bet Virginia here. We'd like to bet against Auburn. Is that Virginia mental toughness there yet? Are they ready for this kind of pressure, a dome environment, passion crowds? We're not sure. So we'll have a little Virginia, but there are just enough compelling reasons to not have a lot of Virginia.
Yeah, but we do have compelling reasons to go with the play of the day. And we're going to go back a little bit to a game we talked about a few minutes ago, that Utah and Georgia Tech. We're going to look for the Yellow Jackets and the Utes to stay under the total 50.5. That's the Vegas Sports Day play of the day for New Year's Eve, the Georgia Tech-Utah game, under the total. Let's have it not be a fun one to watch. Again, Dave mentioned how few tickets the two teams have sold. Let's have it be sluggish, lethargic, and boring as hell. That's exactly what you want to see when you're betting unders. Take the Yellow Jackets and Utes under 50.5. Vegas Sports Day play of the day.
Sluggish, lethargic. That was a Thomas Hobbs closing for a play of the day.
Well, today's show was short, nasty, and brutish, but by God, it's over now. Thank you so much for taking. That's Thomas Hobbs. Come on, guys. You know that one. For Malinsky, I'm Savransky. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll be back with a huge weekend preview show. NFL, college football, NBA, college hoops. 23 hours. Be here.